Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Faculty of Education Summer Leadership Forum. My name is Lin Goodwin. I'm the Dean of the Faculty of Education, and it is with great pleasure that I welcome you here this afternoon. We have 4 fantastic graduates from our faculty who come from very different programs and very different professions, all of whom provide leadership in a variety of ways in their own context. So I'm very happy to introduce them. I'll begin with Mr. He Dennis, who is currently a secondary school teacher of liberal studies and geography and is a graduate of our BEd and BEd&BSocSc social science program. Welcome, Dennis. We have Ms. Ho Yi He Esther. She is a graduate from one of our master's programs, Language Across the Curriculum, and she is the head of economics and business at an international school in Brunei. So we have a very sort of international group here as well. Welcome, Esther. To the bottom left of your screen is Mr. Gonda, Donn Emmanuel Ventura. Donn is an MSc ITE graduate and is currently working at Hong Kong UST, Hong Kong University of Science and Technology, and is an assistant education development manager there. Finally, but certainly far from least, is Ms. Mok Wai-Ling Winnie Royden, who is a second-time graduate from our faculty. She received her second degree from the PGDE program in early childhood education and is currently the principal of Christchurch Kindergarten here in Hong Kong, a very, very well-known kindergarten. So thank you, everyone, friends, for being here, and thank you to our audience for joining us this afternoon. You're probably wondering about the title of this session, sort of Leadership for the 31st Century, and know that it's not a typo, because the conversation we're going to have today is about now, but also about far into the future. Because even if you talk about leadership for the 21st century, the reality is that we're already in the 21st century. So we want to imagine much more boldly about leadership from the perspectives of these 4 wonderful graduates. So we all know that we've been through, continue to go through a challenging moment. And it's just not a moment in Hong Kong, but it's a moment around the globe. And we are very fortunate in Hong Kong that we are in pretty good shape as far as the COVID pandemic is concerned, and can be grateful for things being fairly under control. But we have been through and continue to go through some challenging times. And so I wanted to talk to each of the graduates to hear from their perspective about leadership during challenge, during a time of challenge. So I'm going to ask each one of them to tell us a little story, a brief story that sort of illustrates a problem or a dilemma or an event that they recently experienced where they put their leadership skills to work to solve this issue. So let me begin with Esther as our first storyteller.
Okay, hello everyone. It's my honor to join the forum today. So I would like to share a little bit of stories about what I've experienced during the COVID-19. So currently I'm teaching in Brunei. So probably some of you probably don't know about where Brunei is. It's a very small country, very peaceful one on a beautiful Borneo island. So it's kind of like sharing the border between Malaysia and Indonesia. So my current job actually is my first year to take this position, the head of economics and business in an IB school in Brunei. So actually the challenge that we face is that our school actually closed right after one day that the Brunei government announced there's only 1 case of COVID-19. So actually it only give us luckily it's just like the school shut down on Friday. So it means it will only give all of the teachers 3 days to prepare for the virtual school. So within our team, the Department of Economics and Business, we really encounter a very big challenge. Why? Because we have 6 members in my department, but only 2 of us had really used the Zoom and know how to conduct online teaching. So actually, the school gave us a package about how to run the virtual school, and everything actually went quite smoothly for the first week. But as time goes by, we realized that things just went wrong. Why? Because we realized that the motivation and also the attendance rate of the students online declined significantly. And even though like my staff and then my members put a lot of efforts in planning the lessons and all of this, they feel very frustrated. So that's why we're kind of like falling in a dilemma between the falling level of well-being of our staff and also the motivation of our students. So that's why at that moment, think about, even though it's my first year to take the leadership role, I really need to do something to make it happen, to satisfy my staff needs as well as my students' needs. And as always, our visions, my department, I will always stick on it, is that we try to nurture a collaborative environment to satisfy our own well-being of the teachers as well as the students. We always put the students' need first. So that's why we think about like how we're going to sort out the things. So I think about my teams because I have to make sure the well-being of my team is a priority. If they feel unhappy, then they can't make my students happy as well. So during the lockdown, during the virtual school, even we couldn't meet each other, we still maintain a routine of communication at the beginning of the week and the end of the week. And I highlight the importance of innovation of lessons because look, the motivation declined, we have to make some changes. And I come up with an idea. We always think that what we're doing is the right thing, but do we think about how our students feel? So that's why I come up with an idea that why not we ask for students and parents survey about what's happening in the last few weeks in the lockdown. So probably the feedback will be a very, very useful tool for us to find out why their motivation declined and what we could have done better. And from the student survey, we found it really, really useful that the students don't like long-term sitting in front of the screen, which means that they can't really get used to this kind of like a synchronous learning for such a long time. So this is a very significant part that enabled us to reflect on what we could have done better. So within my team that I highlight, we allow mistakes, but we always just make sure we're going to self-reflect on it and find out better solutions. So that's why within our team, we always collaborate to figure out a lot of different ideas about asynchronous learning. So for example, one of the colleagues raised that, what about we do some inter-school competitions online so that our kids can not only reflect on their strengths and weakness and also still communicate and socialize with the other peers around the world. And we tried it and we make it. And the students feel really, really motivated that, well, online learning is not just being about being isolated at home. And I still can socialize and talk to the different people from all the world to share their views and ideas about economics and business. And also, we try to do a lot of asynchronous lessons, like trying to push our students to interview their parents, get rid of the screen, and do a lot of like interactive activities with the use of the facilities at home, rather than sitting in front of the screen for so long. After 2 months, we feel like there's really a big improvements on that. So as a summary, I think the most important thing about leadership is not how you lead the team, it's how you create a nurturing and collective environment to build up trust and respect for your members and build up togetherness to solve the problem. As a quote said, if life gives you a lemon, why not turn it into lemonade? So that's why you need to guide your team to work towards the vision. And that's all from me. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Esther. You've given us so much to think about in those few minutes. And I think one thing that I sort of take away from that is that as everyone switched quickly, to online learning, sometimes there was not enough attention paid to more than the academics. So the first move was to try to replicate what was happening, face to face into an online environment. And many of us discovered very quickly that learning is much more than academics. So I'm wondering, Dennis, if this resonates with you in your role as a secondary school teacher in the pivot towards online learning during COVID.
I shared a lot of Esther's feelings, especially is the declining in students' motivation. Not so much in attendance rate, because in secondary schools, we do have to take attendance before each lesson. So it wasn't a big problem, but indeed, I could see that the responses from the Zoom classes or their assignment turnouts turned out to be not very good. And it's because I work in a local secondary school, some of the students faces some technical difficulties. So you would have to shout, can you hear me? Can you see the screen? Are you here? Can you answer me? All the time in the lesson. But I gradually found out that it's not because of technical difficulties, but because they felt quite lonely at home. Maybe their families are with them, but they are not with their classmates, they're not with their friends, they can't really interact with their teachers immediately. So it was quite difficult for me to get used to, because as Professor Goodwin said, we tried to very quickly adapt to the new technology, and we did try to create the good old days. That means we tried to put the normal schooling, the normal classroom into Zoom and into the virtual setting. And it was quite challenging at first. It was fun at first, actually, though challenging, because students are quite interested in this new mode of learning. But around 2 or 3 weeks in, you can see the decline in motivation. And for me, other than what Esther has mentioned about the collaboration with colleagues and getting ideas and insights from your team members, I also find that it's time to listen to students' needs. Actually, this COVID-19, this quarantine time or this class suspension has allowed more room for teachers and students. Supposedly, we are supposed to have more room to think about our lessons, and students have more time to learn in various ways. Yet, it seems that this did not happen, and it's one of my colleagues said it's a good opportunity to go beyond the classroom in this period of time. Yet I reflect back upon the classes and the past few weeks. It seems that I've been trying very hard to create the normal thing, like so-and-so normal. And it seems that I need to pay more attention and be more empathetic towards the students and towards their needs. Perhaps there were a lot of stories, but one of them that hit me quite hard was that some students, I texted some students after each lesson and asked them how they felt about the lesson, was the pace too quick or everything. And then one student just told me, it was actually black screen for the entire lesson. It was a 1-hour lesson. And I asked myself if I've asked them whether they could see the screen, or if I've could have understand them more in this process, perhaps they would have learned better. And perhaps this would be a shift in thinking about learning. So for me, I don't know whether I've done a lot of leadership things, but the thing is to be more empathetic and try to communicate with the students, because they are not only at home by themselves, but they are also experiencing a lot of new emotions and new situations. And as leaders, can we recognize the contextual limitations? Can we make use of these limitations, not to create the old days, but to look forward to a new mode of learning and a new mode of lesson? Or can we really empower students to allow them to explore ways of learning by themselves, or topics of interests, or that this whole more teacher-student directed learning could be changed in such a way? So yeah, I guess I have these kind of feelings, and I think that really trying to be more empathetic perhaps would be a very important quality for a leader.
Thank you so much. I'm hearing some themes already between Esther's response and Dennis's response. The focus on communication and looking outside yourself to figure out the needs of students or coworkers or parents. I've heard sort of well-being, empathy, students' feelings and emotions, caring for the person in addition to the mind, right, the intellect. So thinking about well-being and thinking about very little people, perhaps I'll turn to Winnie now to see how you connect to this idea of students' well-being with kindergartners during a time of COVID.
Well, COVID-19 hit it with a big bomb because for kindergarten, we were told before Chinese New Year that school would resume after Chinese New Year. So we were prepared for children to come back. Then after Chinese New Year, I still remember the date, March the 16th. And then it just went on and on and on. So we were all panicking because we didn't know how to deliver learning to children, because as we all know, learning at this stage is increasingly play-based and it relies on activities and group interactions. So how could we do that online? So I actually talked with all my colleagues. We have loads of brainstorming sessions, and we came up with a hybrid model that did not require children to sit in front of the devices for long periods. We basically did, for each day, we did a video. A short one, 20 to 40 minutes, depending on Monday. It's a bit longer because we introduced a theme. So we would deliver the video to the children, and we have done all new activities which require the children to interact with the parents. So that's where the human factors get in. And we actually, without setting tasks for the parents, we are setting tasks for the parents. We encourage them to play with the children, to interact with them, to read with them. We involve the children's siblings. If they don't have siblings, we said you can play with your helpers or your parents when they come back. So that's one way we're doing it. The other way, the other thing is there was quite a lot of talk about doing Zoom for kindergarten. I strongly resisted it because the whole COVID prompted me to think about the impact of technology on young children's learning. And I really don't want to turn them into cyborgs, which are part human and part machine. So because everywhere you go, you see parents using digital devices to placate the children. And I mean, just to reinforce this point of mine, I used to go to Education Expo, and there's rows and rows of books selling toys, books, teaching aids. But now the majority of them are selling, digital innovations and gadgets for schools. So I really want to stop this intrusion of technology at this tender age, because what I really think the most important thing in order to cater for the well-being of young children is that they have to acquire human skills. And as we look towards the 31st century, human skills is what is so important. And we don't do it now at this age when they are very open to suggestions. It's going to be very difficult to do it. So I focus my curriculum online with all my colleagues on 4 C's. So we did creativity, critical thinking, collaboration, and communication. And the second point was I realized that education and schooling are totally different. It's so different. Schooling is actually only part of education, and that unless we involve parents, we cannot work in the best interest of the child. We need to work in partnership with parents, and we need to come up with some strategies which can empower the parents to work with the school for the benefit of the children's learning. And thinking out these strategies would be a very exciting challenge for all of us as we look to the 31st century.
Great. Thank you so much, Winnie. So, Donn, you are an IT person. And so you are obviously someone whom I'm sure a lot of colleagues turn to for suggestions, for advice, for support, for assistance. I'm also sure that you're aware of some of the I guess, some of the resistance, right, to technology. Just thinking about, your own leadership during a time of COVID, working with a variety of mostly adults, if I'm not mistaken, some of whom are going to embrace technology and others who are worried about, becoming cyborgs. What did you do?
I think I do agree with Winnie that especially for a very young age, you really have the human skills is very important. The connection, the communication is very much emphasized at this very age. But I guess in that sense, I'm also lucky that I'm dealing with adults where they can make their own decisions. And this is the time that I as an IT related person, see it as an opportunity rather than as a threat, because of COVID, everyone was shifted online. Whether I have to say this, that whether you like it or not, you have to shift online, or else you could not survive higher education without moving yourself online. And this changed the mindset in IT education per se, because before you really have to hard sell every apps or every technology or every innovation that you could put inside a classroom. But at this point in time, now they really have to, they suddenly open their minds. But I would also try to get the idea from Dennis that yes, being empathetic with these people is something that you really have to put in your head. Once they start asking for help, this is the time that you really have to put yourself in their shoes. You have to think about what are the capacity of these professors. How would they use this technology? How capable would they be in using this technology? What are the resources that they have on hand? Do they have a TA? Do they have any kind of support that they can do? And their comfort from already shifting to online and adding another layer of interactivity using online tools is another burden for them to carry. And these are all the things that you really have to put in place when you're discussing or talking to professors. For my case, I am very lucky with my course that even though I'm handling 600 students at HKUST, training 600 students on teaching, I was still able to shift most of my activities in an online platform. And what I do see is some kind of opportunity, because I do believe that after this semester of online teaching, I do think that there are some things that we can pick up from that. For adult learners, once you put them in a breakout room for them alone and give them a task, a very clear task, you would see that there is such an increase in interactivity or increase in engagement with them. Once you start to shut your mouth and give the opportunity for students to talk, they would really talk, at least for an adult training perspective. And this is something that is very helpful, and technology really helped them to guide through them and to put all their thinking into a single place. Now, in terms of dealing with faculties, you really have to be careful in that, because you really have to check how much help you could give to them. As much as I would want to help all 1,000+ faculties in HKUST, unfortunately, I can't. Our team is just made up of a few people. But what we can do is to really open all communications with them. So at the end, I think in order for you to survive that semester, being creative is one thing that you really need to be. You really have to be creative, because you have to measure what are your capabilities and what are your goals that you want to achieve, and how could you get from point A to point B is about your creativity. So I think that's one thing that you need. I was able to impart and carry during that time.
Thank you so much. I love that idea of sometimes to lead, you have to be quiet, right? To let others, and I've heard that from each of your stories, that it wasn't simply about each one of you charging forward by yourselves, but working with others, collaborating, getting stories, letting folks sort of figure it out. So this is a question that we didn't talk about before, so I hope you don't mind if I sort of throw it in, but, and it just requires a very brief little answer. If you think back to the last 6 months and the challenges that you had to overcome, did you surprise yourself yourselves in ways that you didn't realize before. You know, discovered a strength that you didn't realize that you had. Suddenly, you know, discovered that you were very good at something that you never even thought about doing before. And I'll just throw it open to the floor to anyone of you who would like to begin.
Shall I say it first then?
Yes, please, Winnie.
Yeah, I don't think I've discovered strength in myself, but rather I have improved myself in certain areas, like how to talk to parents, how to get the staff to do something which is outside the comfort zone. So this communication skills is actually, even though I preach, you know, teaching young children communication skills, I've also enhanced my own. And obviously, by always asking, you know, your colleagues, the parents, are you okay? And listening to them, it does help to build up an excellent bridge with all the stakeholders of the kindergarten.
Great. So that idea of active listening.
Yeah, active listening.
Thank you so much. Anyone else? Yes, Esther.
Same as Winnie, I don't find like much like of a strength is expressed, but I feel like there's a lot of improvements from my side as well as my team in the last few months. Especially, we really reflect on our teaching in the last few years, as this is a really good opportunity for us to reflect on. Sometimes it's not what we think that's best for the kids, is that we give more ownership and choice and flexibilities of the students. Just similar to what I mentioned in my previous case, like rather than giving like a long-term Zoom lessons, we would rather give more like asynchronous activities to give our students more choices and cater to their needs. And this is what, as myself and my whole team reflect on. And also, I think one more thing we really improve is the crisis management. Yeah, because like we are just giving 3 days to start the virtual school. And our whole team just works so closely to each other, because in the classroom, in the school, we always work isolatedly in our own rooms, only talk during department meeting, but we never realize that we're such a cohesive team and then work together to sort out the problems. And we have our own chat groups, like one teacher, oh, I got the problems, and the other just come up with an idea very quickly. And we sort out what is feasible to make a change. So I think it's a really good chance for us to change the environment within my department. So in some way, I'm grateful that the COVID-19 has actually fundamentally reformed the way we teach and how we work as a team.
Terrific. Thank you so much, Esther.
Well, oh yeah. So I think I've discovered that I actually could be quite disciplined. So for those who know me quite well, would know that I'm not a very disciplined person. I have a lot of ideas. I like to explore different things, and I also always chase the deadline. Or I'm a very good deadline fighter. But then when COVID-19 happened, when the EDB announced that there will be a suspension of schools, it was very weird that I sat down immediately and thought about what I have to do with different classes and what I could do with my students. And I made a timetable for myself because at the beginning, because it was right after Chinese Lunar New Year. So we didn't have a very fixed schedule for our lessons. And then I became this person that I didn't really know, which is quite a very disciplined person. I wrote out timetables, I made lists, and then I asked the students whether they were okay in different sessions, because we were given the freedom at the beginning of the class suspension to have lessons with our students whenever we can and whenever they can. So that part, I quite missed that very well-disciplined Dennis. I've turned back to the rather less disciplined Dennis now, maybe because of the resumption of class, and everything seems to go back to normal. But that part really, because there was less monitoring, and there was less I would say less contextual limitations, in the sense that I'm not in a school anymore and my students are not in the school anymore. So I've learned to be more self-disciplined. And of course, and also I've learned, I've actually discovered that, I could actually talk quite well, or in the sense that students enjoy listening to me, even though they might not respond. But after I've come back, I've heard that during this time, students perhaps found my videos or my lessons still quite useful, and hopefully they remember the things. But yeah, so I think it's more about myself being more self-disciplined, and I hope this will continue despite the changes that might come.
I can see your students enjoying your videos. I certainly am enjoying listening to you. So Donn, so we have Winnie and Esther, who did discover something new, but were able to improve and strengthen qualities that they already had. And then we had Dennis, who discovered another part, a facet of his identity that he didn't know before and now has acquaintance with. Where do you fall in any of those two areas?
For me, it's more like leaning towards similar to Dennis. I learned something from myself, or I was forced to learn something for myself. It was the idea of stepping back and listening. So in terms of adult learning, once you ask your students, how was my lesson? They all know that every after lesson, I will be asking my students, how was it? How do you think? How can we improve further? It's always a 3 standard question. How do you think? How can we improve further? Any suggestions? So you always ask those questions, give them that opportunity, and they will give you the answers. And you don't even have to, all you need to do is to make it happen in the next round. And in the next round, same process. You ask yourself, you step back again, ask the question, how was it? Any way to improve it? And they will give you another answer. So for the past weeks that I was teaching with during the pandemic time, you always go through that process, and you will learn a lot from your students, that they are not just there sitting. They are somewhat observing and giving you constructive feedback. And these are the things that you really have to take into account when you move forward. And this also applies to how I tell other teachers. So all you need to do is actually be bold, do something. If you think that you're going to fail on it, so be it. We are in pandemic. Everybody is expecting everyone to fail at one point. So all you have to do is to embrace it and just ask your student back the question. What was it that I did something wrong, and how can I improve it? What are the good things that I have done that we can keep? And from this, all you have to do is to carry it forward. So that's one thing I've learned during this pandemic.
That's lovely. There's a researcher named Manu Kapoor who does research on productive failure. Most of us are afraid of failure, when in actual fact, failure is what, it means that you took a risk. It means that you tried something. It means that you are moving forward, even if it's only a step at a time. So I think that is a great reminder from you, Donn, about the importance of trying things out, taking a risk. And during this unusual circumstance, we are free, right, to try things out. And the other is this notion of learners or people as empty slates. And it sounds as though from each of you that you've reminded us, whether you're talking about students, children, adults, whether you're talking about employees in a corporation, none of them is an empty slate. They come with stuff. So they deserve listening to, and good leaders understand that it is important to draw out from the audience, whatever audience you're working with, in order to best meet needs. I'm going to turn now to, we did have some questions that were sent to us in preparation for this event. And one question is actually sort of connected to the last question that I'm going to pose to the panel. So the last question is about leadership for the 31st century, to try and sort of transcend the current moment, to think about long into the future, long after all of us have ceased to exist. What is sort of some enduring principles or values or qualities of leadership that will stand the test of time? And this is connected to the question that Annika asked, and she is a student, of course, in the Faculty of Education. And her question is, how has leadership changed in terms of crisis management, in particular with COVID-19, social unrest situation in Hong Kong? What should be the priorities for a leader during these situations? Any theories or guidelines to support our decision making? So I'm going to blend those two together to think sort of not just now, but as I said, long into the future, enduring qualities that will last us for many centuries. Why don't I start with Donn, since you have brought up the rear in the last two rounds of conversation?
One thing that I will be thinking is that two qualities. First is that you need to be resilient. In any form, you have to be resilient. It might be social unrest, it might be COVID, it might be another form of anything that might come ahead forward. But if you are resilient enough, and whenever you fall, you just have to stand up and do it again and do it again until you get it right, then eventually you will get there. Failure is always part of it. I do believe that failure is always part of it. You just have to charge ahead and move forward. And the second part is you have to be creative. And for you to be creative, you really have to listen to your stakeholders. You really have to listen. I mean, you could be creative on your own, but without your stakeholders, your creativity is as good as nothing. You really have to connect what you build or what you're about to build or what you're about to make with the people you care the most. And for my case, that will be my student, that will be the faculty that I serve. And these are the things that I will be doing. So being resilient, stand up for them, and second, listen to them and be creative with them. That will be the two things that I will be carrying.
Thank you so much, Donn. Dennis.
For me, it would echoing to Donn, listening to the needs of my students or the people that I work with. It's the word that I mentioned before, is being empathetic. It's to understand my students' needs, their limitations, and to allow them to have this room and have this time of adjustment, especially in COVID-19. We thought everything would be over very quickly, or we thought you were just at home, so everything would be fine. But this is not the case. So we really need to be empathetic. And it's also about being empathetic towards oneself, is whether we also accept that we need time to learn, we need time to adjust, we need to accept our own failures or the things that are not quite successful. So that would be the first very important principle. The second one would be to be reflective. I think it's to echo to what Esther said, is about questioning whether we have been doing the right thing. And also it's quite important, not because it's usually, we usually think that we have done, like we didn't do enough in a lot of situations. But in COVID-19, I always ask myself, am I doing too much? Or am I doing the right thing? Is it aligned with my own values and beliefs? And I think it applies to not only COVID-19, but the whole situation in Hong Kong is are we doing the right thing? Is it aligned with my own values and principle? Should I do more? Or sometimes should I just be there with my students, listening to them? Or sometimes should I even just let go of allowing them time, allowing them the room for their own improvement or their own growth. So I've been learning, I'm still learning about these qualities, and I'm trying to actualize them. And I hopefully it will be, I will continue to do that in the coming days.
Thank you, Dennis. Esther.
Echoing to Dennis and Donn's idea about creativity and then being empathetic, and also listening to the needs of your members and then the students, I would like to add two more. I think the enduring quality I find for the leaders in the 31st centuries maybe. Okay, so no matter what really happens and changes around the world, so a leader, the enduring quality should be, the leader should be the person that you lead the team with trust and respect. That's what I've been looking into since the start of my role this year, without being cohesive and also being a sense of togetherness. So even though we're very competitive with a lot of skills, You can't make it without a team who places trust and confidence on you. So you must need someone to behind you, to support you towards the vision goal. And I think this is kind of an enduring quality that leaders should have. You must be a great person.
Thank you.
I totally agree with all my co-speakers. I just want to add a point about being more forward-looking, because as leaders, we are quite caught up with the present, and sometimes we fail to lay a foundation for the future. The trouble is that leadership is often seen as being someone that can respond to a crisis, and the current situation, the COVID-19, reinforces this idea. But I think leadership should rise above the crisis. A leader should be very clear in her mind what her fundamental principles are. And whatever we do in a crisis, we have to maintain those principles. We must not let the situation threaten to undermine them. Basically, we shouldn't let the crisis and take our eye off the ball. Since I work in early childhood, I want to focus on the child's learning. So as educators, we should rise above the crisis, because there's going to be crises all the time. And unless we lay a foundation, it's very difficult to carry on to the 31st century, because we're dealing with the present and not the future. And I think education system now is in Hong Kong is educating for the past, not for the future, because we are creating cyborgs in education. we have to get some human skills in the children as early as possible.
Can't agree with you more, and not so much about the cyborgs, but about this idea of kind of the human qualities. And I think that the COVID pandemic has really sort of shown the light on all those so-called soft skills, which I always laugh at, because they're actually very, very hard skills to develop and to sustain. It's actually much easier to focus on content and academics, but to think about ethics, to think about empathy, to think about creativity, to think about collaboration, those are much, much harder to teach. So just, there is one more question, but just in kind of wrapping up this section of the session, these are sort of some of the things I've heard from you about leadership that can transcend the moment and last, sort of for a lifetime or several lifetimes. So one is the idea of not being satisfied. And because all of you talked about improvement, about reflection, about thinking about, did I do this correctly? Should I have tried that route? The notion of decision making and weighing options and facing dilemmas as leaders. The second thing I heard from you was generosity, to be forgiving, to accept failure, to forgive others, but also to forgive yourself, knowing that moments are not going to be perfect, and that it's always sort of a process and hopefully a forward-moving endeavor. The third thing I heard from each of you is this idea of leading from behind. All of you talked about listening to other people, listening to students, letting go. Quite often, folks think about leaders as kind of the point on the top, but the reality is that leadership is an encompassing skill, quality, and in some ways personality. And so sometimes what leaders do to move things forward is to step back. Finally, the last thing I heard from you is that leaders don't lead alone. They lead with others, with colleagues, with students, with parents, with friends. I'm sure many of you connected to friends and family as you puzzled through some of the issues that you were facing. So let's turn to the question that is posed by another student, of course, from the Faculty of Education. Thank you so much, Fu Jingyuan, for your question. And this is a question I'm really interested to hear all your responses to, and it's about women as leaders. So women are increasingly praised for having excellent skills for leadership, but in fact, male leaders still tend to dominate at work. What are the advantages and what aspects should women focus on to succeed in male-dominated leadership roles? Anyone can jump in at any time.
Well, with greatest respect to the questioner, I think there may be a danger with a question like this, because again, we are fighting the battles of the last war. If we are focusing on the 31st century, we need to move forward thinking. We need to be more forward thinking. So what we should be looking at is what skills do both men and women need to cultivate for them to be able to survive and thrive in the future. Right now in education, it's quite a male-dominated curriculum, and we're focusing on a lot of competition, very aggressive attitudes. Schooling is like just one long competition throughout your entire life. Well, schooling is just part of education. So but what I do agree with the questioner is that we are not going to get any real change while it is in the men's best interest to preserve the status quo. So we do need to change that particular part. If the only thing is, if women want is to be able to get the same jobs as men, they should be thinking like that. They should be thinking about jobs which themselves are going to be changed because robots are going to take over. Maybe there's going to be no teachers in the future. So in order to look forward to the 31st century, we have got to change our mindset.
Someone else?
I think I do agree with Winnie that in the long run, you should be forward thinking and you should be thinking about like what both men and women should do. But in the short run, I mean, based on the question that's saying that, you know, it's a male dominated industry or roles are men dominated, I think I will go back to the two things that I would always say, like resilience, because we've been moving forward. Women in the industry are moving forward. And it's getting more and more traction now. That's the thing. If it gets more traction, then eventually it will at one point. I mean, of course, we cannot do everything overnight, or we cannot change it in a snap. But if you are resilient and if you are creative enough, like what Winnie is saying, like don't focus on a male-dominated job. Like try to focus on the things that you would flourish and you will be good at. And even if you look at the leaders now and those who are able to flatten the curve, most of them are in a female leaders country. If you would notice, I mean, majority of them are in that. And this is the thing that now in terms of like social media and stuff, you need to get that traction. You need to keep that going. And once you get that eventually will be the status quo. And for men, all we need to do is to support for the status quo to happen. If you are a leader and you are a guy in your own field, give opportunities to women. That's how it is. And open all possibilities for both sexes. I think that's the only way we can do it for us to all move forward with this.
Thank you, Donn. Dennis or Esther?
Yeah, I agree with the notion of moving forward and of thinking about having equality among different genders. But I also think that the qualities we mentioned today, they are not for any particular gender, or they're not for particularly male or female. They are for everyone. And everyone has, I believe that everyone has the capability to develop these qualities given the right circumstances. And I think with what we have mentioned today, being resilient, being creative, being empathetic, being reflective, and being forward-looking, and being an active listener, these are, it's important to develop them it should be developed in our education and throughout the education. And the thing is how to allow each individual, despite their gender or anything, to discover their talents and to discover their interests and to tell them it's okay to develop them. Despite many voices might say no to that, or despite people saying that that's not the most important quality or most important interest, or that is not significant enough. I think each of us has in our many years have heard those voices, and we've become who we are today because we did not listen to some of them, or we kept them in mind and we tried to tell them they're wrong. And I think if I'm just a secondary school teacher, and if I could allow my students to feel that, to allow them to know that it's okay that they have certain interests or they have certain their talents, they could be recognized. Even in this system that we say we're raising cyborgs or we are raising machines, but anything, we could have this freedom in our own classrooms to do that. And I think we could do that, and we could be the agent of change if we are willing to do so. So that's what I think about that question.
Very nice. Thank you, Dennis. So Esther.
Yeah, I think based on all this, like the presentations of my co-speakers, I would like to say this is a question that will be a really good questions to the young graduates as well, because like from this time, like the COVID-19, probably a lot of you, the young graduates, may face a very hardships in finding a job, in particular in teaching. And also probably some of you are thinking about whether I should continue teaching or not. So I think one important thing you always look into yourself is that what you could do within yourself to maximize your strengths and try to minimize your weakness to meet the increasing opportunities and try to avoid the threats. And this is kind of a model when I teach my students in the IB business. We have a SWOT model. So before making any decisions, you're going to analyze your strengths and weakness, and also to think about what the opportunities ahead of you, what the potential threats in front of you may be, the barriers of your targets. So being like in a dilemma, like whether female may have lower chances of being more successful or not, is actually wasting of time. Instead, you should focus on what you can do by doing forward looking and to find out solution to give your chance more opportunity to find out what you like and what you're actually good and fitting for. And one more thing I would like to give advice to the graduate is that don't be afraid of failure and don't be afraid of mistakes, and don't be too influenced by the external factors. Just focus on what you can do to fit in the change of the market, to fit in the change in the society, and just demonstrate your best no matter what happens. And that's my advice.
We've heard some really good advice this afternoon and heard some inspiring and very practical, inspiring stories and very practical suggestions. I think that the one thing that COVID-19, the pandemic, has demonstrated to all of us is that first, it is possible to lead from wherever you are. So Dennis, you are definitely not just a secondary school teacher. You are leading young people into their lives. And I think that is so very, very important. The second thing is that it has caused us all to move very quickly and do things perhaps that maybe in the good old days we might have discussed or pondered or thought about, weighed for a while. And we didn't have that luxury. Esther had 3 days to get things together. Everyone had to sort of move on a dime, so to speak, in order to meet the needs of students in a very, very exceptional situation. Not just that we couldn't be together, but that there were safety issues and health issues involved at the same time. So literally lives were at stake. And that was a great burden for all of you to carry, and obviously you've done it admirably. The third thing that I think about, and this comes, it's connected to the robots and the cyborgs. And we do know that many, many jobs have been taken over by AI. We know that for a fact. You can look at the data. So this idea of educating for the future and not the past is incredibly critical. But the one thing I think that we've learned is that, and this has been an age-old debate, will technology X take the place of human teachers? And I think the answer we know now is no. Teaching will obviously have to change as a result of technology. But teachers will not go away, because the human factor, which has been so critical during this time, has, I think, demonstrated to us the central role that teachers, human beings, play in interactions with each other. So in closing this wonderful session, thank you so much to our great graduates. If you are a student currently in the Faculty of Education, you have 4 really amazing role models to look up to and to inspire towards. It is clear that something is right. We cannot take credit. I'm sure we know you were great before you came to us, but we are so happy that you chose to study with us, because each of you is doing such a wonderful job. So we have literally 4 minutes left. That means 1 minute for each one of you to give a last word to our current students or to our recent graduates. A word of encouragement, a word of inspiration, a word about being a leader from wherever you are. I'll start with Esther.
My last piece of advice to the graduate is, firstly, of course, good luck to your future adventure. So life is just a journey with all the unknowns, but just make sure to be yourself and to find out what you love and follow your passion and truth.
Donn?
Just keep on doing what you're doing. I mean, at one point you'll get there. Every small effort would count. So just keep on doing what you need to do.
Terrific. Winnie?
I think whatever you do, you have to find joy in it. So if you're happy, you're joyful, then it will just work out. Everything will just work out.
Dennis, carry us away.
Yeah, so I think you're not alone in the journey, in this journey, and you have a lot of people who are with you, who believe in the same things as you, and you will be able to find them, and with good companionship and good friends, you would be able to lead in your own way. So yeah.
So thank you again, each one of you. And I'm going to take this opportunity to say that we hope that this conversation doesn't end with this event today, that we hope to follow up with you, to ask you more leadership questions, and I think to put your stories in our Education Matters, our next volume. So thank you, everyone, for being here. Thank you to the audience. Really appreciate your time. Graduates, you do us proud. Really, thank you so much.
Thanks for having
you.
us.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you.